So my name is Doreen Horschig, and I'm currently the Raymond Frankel Nuclear Security Policy Fellow, a handful at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and also a research associate at the School of Politics, Security, and International Affairs at the University of Central Florida. And at the American Academy, I currently arrange educational briefings on nuclear arms control, disarmament, but also deterrence for members of Congress. And I organize track two dialogues between US, Russian, and Chinese nuclear experts, and also lead a publication series on nuclear issues. Yeah, so while a large part of my work with the American Academy concerns arms control and disarmament, my field of research expertise actually deviates a bit and is twofold. So, doing my PhD and my postdoc, I largely examined nuclear and chemical weapons norms and the contestation of such, and looked at public opinion with a focus on psychological factors of individual attitudes towards nuclear weapons. But now I've been increasingly interested in counterproliferation, and specifically, I explore for that what some of the normative and the political and legal constraints of different methods of counterproliferation are, and when states turn to counterproliferation to hinder the qualitative and the quantitative nuclear developments. And I also have another research project that looks at states' responses to the use of nuclear counterproliferation. Yeah, so given my research expertise, I would say I have a good understanding of the historical examples that include counterproliferation. So I'd be happy to cover examples of covert and clandestine actions, such as Operation Stuxnet or Operation Orchard, the Israeli airstrike on the Syrian nuclear reactor in 2007. But I can also cover more so introductions to nuclear weapons that include concepts such as proliferation, deterrence, mutual assured destruction, or just simply looking at the arms control history between Russia and the US. And on the highly enriched website, I've also uploaded a Cuban Missile Crisis Group exercise, and I would be more than happy to cover that in a lecture. But I also found that my students at UCF have very much enjoyed a role-playing simulation. I had one, for example, that explored the challenges of trying to keep nations with fuel rod recrossing technology from developing nuclear weapons. So wide variety, but yeah, definitely happy to do a little bit beyond lecturing, more so the role play and the simulation. So I would say I have slightly more experience in mentoring college students. I mentored several of my own students at UCF beyond my classroom, and also through the Girls Security Mentoring platform. And as a foreigner who came to the US after high school, I would say I have more knowledge of the college system, whether it's undergraduate or graduate studies. Since I've never been in the US middle or high school system, I could only broadly speak on career development before college. So I do want to highlight that I would love to mentor international students as well, as I'd be happy to sort of pass on lessons or information that I wish I would have known before I came to the States and navigated the college system here. Yeah, good question. So as a child, yeah, who just becomes interested in nuclear weapons, right? But as a child, I was always interested in the field of international politics more generally, probably because my dad always discussed global news with me at a very early age. And so my original goal was to work for the German Foreign Affairs Office. And it wasn't until I had two classes at NYU during my graduate studies that I really got into nuclear policy. My professor and mentor at the time supported me in writing my thesis on the conditions of nuclear deterrence. And that's when I realized that the nuclear status quo, and that which is one of modernization and a reliance of mutual assured destruction and deterrence, is just not sustainable, and the consequence of inaction are just unacceptable. So yeah, that was my motivation to sort of pursue my PhD, to develop the necessary research skills to make a significant contribution to the field of nuclear non-proliferation efforts and sort of changing that status quo. So even if it's just a small contribution, I'm now using that PhD to support policy development that advances arms control and the strategic dialogue between Russia, China, and the US. So my path has been largely an academic one at that. So I'm using my research experience now for policy relevant work. I came to the academy from a postdoc at MIT Security Studies program where I was a Stanford Nuclear Security Fellow. And previously to that, I had obtained my PhD in Security Studies from UCF, an MA in International Relations from NYU, and a BA from Manhattan College in International Studies. But doing my graduate studies that were, of course, very research heavy, I also gained some practical experience as a fellow at the Plowshares Fund, a global security organization, and also from instructing different courses at UCF. One of them was strategic weapons and arms control, and the other one was American foreign policy. Yeah, I think the Russian war in Ukraine and other veiled nuclear threats sort of have put the dangers posed by nuclear weapons back into the public consciousness. And this war is on top of course, the simmering tensions on the Korean Peninsula and between India and Pakistan, but also the failure to resolve the Iranian nuclear program, as well as the threat of Chinese military action over Taiwan. So I think there's a true urgency for more effective nuclear arms control and disarmament. Back during the Cold War, we had numerous demonstrations against the possession, proliferation, and deployment of nuclear weapons. And now there are several grassroots efforts again, and I do think that the public does care more again, as they should. The nuclear powers think of the current international order as a stable one, but I do think that it is time that the status quo is questioned and potentially reformed, and that the existence of nuclear weapons is not treated as a cast iron system. There's a worldview that frames change as dangerous and risky, and the status quo is the best of all possible worlds. But I do think that is a questionable approach to the current nuclear order. Yeah, where to start in the nuclear issues. So let me focus just in on two. I think first is the development in arms control. The last standing treaty, which is the New START treaty, will expire in 2026. And the strategic stability talks between Russia and the United States have been disrupted by the war in Ukraine and seem very unlikely to resume in the foreseeable future. So if New START is not followed by a new treaty by the time it expires, there will be no limits on US-Russian nuclear forces for the first time since the 1970s. So, and in addition to that, we have political polarization on arms control here in the US, which makes it highly uncertain that the US Congress would approve a new treaty. So that one, but then I guess the second issue that concerns me is a direct result of the limitations to this traditional arms control and disarmament. So if we have the non-proliferation regime become less effective, we might see states resort to other tools to prevent nuclear proliferation. And that can include nuclear counterproliferation, which in other words is the use of preventative force, such as through airstrikes or cyber attacks against nuclear programs. So we've seen this in the past, especially by Israel against the Iranian nuclear program. But other states might resort to this if nuclear-laden states gain interest in having either their own nuclear program or if they lose faith in extended deterrence. So any such covert actions then would certainly raise the risks of escalation between states. But that's only two. There's numerous more, and they're definitely enough.